So we read the first 8 chapters of Twilight, which ends right after they get dinner in Port Angeles. I think it's like a real restaurant that she named it, and like they do have a mushroom ravioli, and it was like a whole thing.
Oh, wow.
I forget this too because it sounds so fake, but Forks is like a real town.
Oh.
It's like, and like Port Angeles is like a real place. They're all actual places in the world that a human could go visit.
I had assumed that they were all sort of fictional locations, like Twin Peaks-esque.
Like a little, yeah. No, Stephanie's not really interested in that. Like a very specifically weird imagination that like does not expand to geography or indigenous peoples. Because the Quileute are like a real tribe. Really playing with... Actually, I don't know which one would be worse for that. I don't know if it's...
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's just as bad to like make up a fake tribe. Probably could have hired a dramaturg of some kind, but... That's how I feel about all media.
Right.
That everything should have a dramaturg.
Absolutely. I think this novel, like most novels, would benefit from a dramaturg.
But yes, so we read the first 8 chapters. Where we left off, they have gotten back into the Silver Volvo, automobile of choice for Edward Cullen, and he is driving her back to Forks while she is figuring out what he is.
And this is the dinner that they have post him rescuing her from street assault in this tiny Pacific Northwest town in a way that was very confusing to me.
Yeah, they like kind of try and call it out as like, how? We're in this tiny tourist trap. Like, how did you even come across these people who were trying to do you harm?
Yeah.
But like, actually though, like how?
I guess she had like wandered far enough away into like an industrial area.
Like, I guess it's plausible. It just like it's a really weird tone shift.
Right. Well, it's interesting that if the set of circumstances was that she goes from this like quaint town to another location and then is in dangerous circumstances, the sort of obvious choice would presumably be to go to a city.
Right, like they didn't even make it to Seattle.
Bella's total lack of survival instincts is interesting to me, in part because I wonder why she wanders into an industrial area outside an unfamiliar place and like continues walking in that direction even after she has that moment of like realization that she's going towards nothingness. And also when she, like, goes into the woods and talks about how she has a really bad sense of direction and is walking alone in the woods. I have no judgment in terms of, like, when Edward is like, I'm dangerous.
Oh, well, yeah.
Like,
that shit's...
Yeah.
we'll get to that.
Right, that's a whole other thing. But, like, it's interesting to me that someone whose dad is a cop and who has spent a lot of time parenting her own mother doesn't have a lot of, like, street smarts.
Yeah, I think it's almost like her scale of danger is like really distorted. Because they make such a big point of she's like so physically hapless that I feel like if you are used to like everything being sort of a dangerous ordeal, like you don't know when you've tripped into like actual objective danger. Or at least I think that's kind of how I read it, is like you've kind of been like left to your own devices for things that you shouldn't have been. Like, being put in this position of authority for both of your parents, separately, for whatever reason. I don't know why Charlie can't clean the dishes. That's normal. Like, if she cooks, you clean. Why are you like this? Cops are garbage. Just, like, if, like, walking on flat ground is historically a problem for you, which is, like, one, a really overplayed kind of rom-com trope, but, like, if we accept the reality of it, and, like, normal directions are hard for you, and, like, everything that you know you have to overcorrect for is already a problem, like... You're already just I'm trying to fake my way through what is apparently normal for everyone else.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. If you already have, like, a migraine, you're not going to notice that you, like, stubbed your toe and your toe kind of hurts.
Word.
It's like, if you're already on a base level of survival panic, then what's one more drop in the bucket?
But yeah, I guess, like, let's loop back for a second. What was your overall impression of this book so far?
I actually enjoyed this a lot more than I expected to. I know that I love campy vampire brooding crap. Like, that's totally in my wheelhouse. But I guess I was bracing myself for the writing to be worse. It's just sort of fine. Like,
it's not as... Granted, I don't remember how things progress in these books, because, like, plot-wise, things get really, like, go off the rails. But I don't know that the books are necessarily warranted the level of vitriol that they got, just like on the basic word choice level, and like it'll get a little purpler as we go. Still, I think like within the realm of the genre.
I think too, some of the really heavy-handed melodramatic interiority stuff that I think is where some of the derision comes from, or is focused on, that actually mostly feels realistic to the context of being in high school and having a really obsessive crush on someone. That completely overblown emotionality and language and behavior is actually what it is like inside of that experience. It's like, yeah, you do walk into a room and immediately figure out where that person is, and you do think these absolutely ludicrous sentences to yourself.
Yeah, I'm frankly still like that, so it reads very normal to me.
I mean, I'm just a lizard person now. It's fine.
I support and affirm you. I have never stopped screaming once in my whole life. But there is also, like, even this early on, even though, like, the relationship itself isn't necessarily that weird for what we know about, there's, like, she has a crush on this dude, he's really weird to her. There is, like, a weird creepiness to it.
Totally.
There is just, like, this element of fear that's not totally right, even before anything's really happened to indicate that that's true, and I found that really interesting reading it through this time.
What's interesting is it's not just that he's weird, right? Mm-hmm. It's that Bella feels like she herself is being a creep. That really spoke to me.
Yeah.
As a creep. But that very much that, like, adolescent anxiety about, like, not only am I an obsessed teen, but I'm aware that I'm, like, being unhealthy and obsessive, and that is something that, like, other people might find out and react negatively to that knowledge. She refers to her feelings as unhealthy, like, pretty early on.
Yeah, like, Bella is very self-possessed in a way that I had not remembered. I love her. I think she's just a great little Virgo.
You know, she has been described to me as a wet blanket, but I don't actually get that. I don't get wet blanket from this character. I get, like, again, no feeling of self-preservation as an impulse.
Which is funny because, like, that did not stick out to me. So I think that, like, that is maybe, like, part of my relationship to these books. It's just, like, I mean, I was gonna say, like, only driven by, like, feelings moment to moment, but she's not. Like, she's actually, like, a very responsible and, like, self-driven person.
Yeah.
And, like, that was one of the things that made me nuts, like, in the initial waves of backlash about this, about, like, Bella is not a good role model, which is a bonkers way to approach character writing.
Right, well, because if you look at the entire history of, like, canonical literature, who's a good role model that is in a book?
Right, or, like, this character isn't feminist. It was like, well, this is not maybe the most useful way for us to approach a text. But she has a car. Even going into it was planning on buying it herself, so it was, like, kind of delighted to not have to do that. Is, like, handling this own move is her call. She's the one who decides to move back. She's the one who's, like, taking over all of the household finances. And, like, grocery shopping and cooking and cleaning and, like, doing all of these household errands that, like, should clearly be her father, who has lived alone for 17 years' job.
Right. There's that exchange where she's like, oh, I'm going somewhere. I'll leave things for sandwiches for you. And he's like, well, I fed myself for 17 years or whatever. And she's like, well, these things are here on the top.
Like,
and I was trying to figure out if that is, like, her being the Virgo-iest Virgo, or if, like, he actually is that hapless.
Yeah, I don't know. And I think that, like, Stephanie Meyer thinks the way she's written Renee, the mom, is, like, more charming than it is.
Oh, Renee sounds like a terrible mother and a terrible
like a
person.
Nightmare.
She really does sound like bad news.
Obviously, like, generally speaking, like, a teen person who is, like, mostly grown up with a single parent is going to have a pretty intense relationship with that person. Mm-hmm. Usually, like, oh, of course I love my mom. But I wonder, like, if this was a different kind of book, if that would maybe be, like, a relationship we actually explored.
Yeah, well, one thing I did write down in my notes to myself.
Ooh, notes.
was thinking about the way in which a child of an irresponsible or kind of flaky parent can sort of have accelerated maturity become a part of their identity. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm the grown-up one in this situation, and so I'm an adult. And so I feel alienated from my peers, and I don't desire to have certain kinds of relationships with my peers. And I think Bella very much is doing that, right?
Yeah.
Like, she talks about not really having any friends in Phoenix, and I think part of the appeal of Edward to her is that he seems older.
Yeah, he also, like, immediately all of them, like, all of the Cullen Hale beautiful people are, like, flagged as different on, like, a bunch of different categories.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, and part of that is this weird sense of, like, they don't really look like they're in high school.
Right, like, they look like they might be in college.
They,
they look like they could even be teachers.
Antiquated names and, like, this weird way of behaving in the world. And I think a lot of people at the time, I think pegged that as, like, oh, like, I'm not like other girls. Like, I want to pursue these people who are, like, really hot and cool and different like I am. But I think that that's probably what you're saying is a more interesting and, like, probably more accurate reading mm-hmm. for this fictional Virgo whom I apparently would die for. It's like...
It's like, well, if everyone else in the building is an actual 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-old, like... It makes sense that a person with this personality who had come from these circumstances would be drawn to the other people who seem like they have actually lived adult lives in some way.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, the petty dramas of, like, Jess and Mike going to the dance together or whatever.
Something that actually struck me a lot more this time through is that, like, sorry, I'm just, like, having vivid flashbacks of every dumb think piece that happened about these books, like, as they were happening. But, like, this idea, like, oh, you know, Bella keeps talking about how she's, like, not that pretty, but all these boys are kind of throwing themselves at her, and, like, with the, like, sort of, if you follow that line of thought to its natural conclusion, it's like, why can't she just, like, be grateful? Like,
so, you know, these dudes sound annoying.
Yeah, and they're kind of predatory.
Yeah.
She mentions, like, a number of times that, like, when Mike is talking to or about her, he has, like, a very possessive tone of voice.
Yeah.
Which is messed up.
Mike, you've known this person for, like, 2 days before you start doing that shit. Like, come on
like,
now.
you're not anything. Like, you're, like, barely even perfunctory friends.
Yeah.
Like, that's weird. And, like, with that backdrop, like, one, nothing Edward has done thus far that we know of is, like, aggressive in that way.
I think until he tells her that he followed her to Port Angeles.
Yes, that's when shit gets weird. But also, like...
I think that's, like, the first actual, like...
red flag.
Oh.
Like, in the... While also, like, so I was reading everyone's minds and I followed you here. And you're like... And she's just like, cool, okay.
Fine. I buy it.
That's scams. It's like... What?
Which, you know, in, like, having consumed so much fantasy and horror and science fiction material, like, there's a part of me that's like, yeah, sure, okay. Like, if someone is like, yeah, I read the minds, and the circumstantial evidence seems to point to that having happened, like, okay, sure.
I think it's at the dinner. She has this line where she's just, let me see if I can find it, because it, like, really kind of shook me. Where she's like, what has been going on in Bella's life that she's kind of ready to roll with all this?
And I wonder how much of her, like... surprisingly chill response to him saying,
quote, I've always been very good at repressing unpleasant things.
And that's the second time she says that.
Like,
because she says it about, like, fishing trips or something.
Yeah.
In, like, the really early on. And both times that it's come up so far, I've been like, what is she alluding to from the past? Because it seems like she's already coming into this book traumatized by something prior to these events.
Yeah.
Because, like, you don't say things or think things like that about yourself. I'm really good at repressing horrific things or unpleasantness, or, like, I don't remember the bad things that have happened to me. You don't really come to that place without, like, some really bad things having happened to you.
Right, or even just, like, that language is so specific and, like, kind of clinical. I don't know, it's, like, very spooky. It's very spooky to have someone say that and, like, not have it be addressed.
Yeah.
By either the person she's talking to or, like, the text itself.
Right. Like, oh, that's a totally chill, normal thing to say.
Yeah, like regular human dentist. Like, all of us are. shoving it down, tamping up the feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, because he's like, yeah, I'm waiting for you to go into shock, like a scary thing just happened to you. And she's like, no, like, we're good. That's been repressed already. Tell me more about your mind reading.
In that moment, I definitely identified more with Edward. So you're just good?
You're just like, we're not gonna...
A bunch of dudes...
Like, kind of...
Like, we're about to
cornered you on, like, a strange... No, that's...
And you're, like, totally fine.
Regular for you.
And you, like, want to know about my life.
Really?
Cool.
Great.
Like, why am I more upset about this than you are?
Right, and then also, like, like a week earlier in text, she almost died getting hit by that car?
Yeah.
And was
or I
mostly...
think there's a little bit more time in between these.
Yeah, I'm not always great at the timeline on this. Like,
it's not super clear.
The book itself is, like, a pretty rapid-fire series of events, but, like, yeah, like, definitely almost died in a very real way. Doesn't seem to care about that at all. It was mostly just like, God, I can't believe they put me on a gurney. It's so embarrassing.
That is the most peak teen shit I've ever
read.
It's like, you almost died, and what you're thinking about is the fact that everyone can see you with a neck brace on. Being a teen is awful.
It's so bad. Don't ever make me go back.
Yeah, seriously.
It's just a nightmare.
It's so bad.
Like, it's bad having a body as an adult.
Oh, that's actually a really good segue into something that I wanted to talk about. The constant, heavy-handed discussion of how deeply clumsy Bella is.
Yeah.
So for one thing, talking about, like, the Americanness of this is how much discussion of sports there is and how much of an emphasis there is on how bad at sports Bella is, and imagining in most books it ever coming up that the main character is bad at badminton. But that feels like it's an important piece of information because it's a part of this, like, larger narrative of how, like, she does not know how to live inside a body.
Yeah. And also, like, her framework for what is, like, cool or attractive is very athletic in a way that is, like, kind of strange to read.
Yeah.
Because when she's talking about, like, even the Cullens and the Hales, whatever, it's like, oh, like, she... Like, the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition, which is, like, such a... One, sort of hilariously wholesome reference point for, like, what a babe who makes me feel kind of self-conscious about myself.
Right.
Even though, like, it's very real. Like, that's a very real thing. But that's also such a specific type of, like, female beauty. And I don't know, I think it depends on, like, which subgenre of YA you are reading. But it's so often is, like, the very waifish thing that is, like, what is causing that particular stress. But in this one, it's like, no, this, like, very tall, athletic, like, curvy, blonde woman. Like,
right.
This very, like, Baywatch type. She's perceiving as, like, the absolute...
That sounds like someone who looks like a woman, right? Like,
right,
a woman and not a girl. Or not a teen, even. Again, some of this, like, aspirations or expectations of, like, adulthood.
Yeah.
And what that means physically, in addition to, like, how you behave with other people. And, like, just the constant description of, like, the gracefulness or lack of grace.
And, like, musculature.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, like, this auburn-haired boy looks kind of swole.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that she, like, thinks so much about how other people move, because in my, like, anecdotal experience, people who are super clumsy are people who aren't thinking about that stuff all the time. They're just not thinking actively about moving through three-dimensional space and other things moving through three-dimensional space in that kind of physical way. That's why they'll, like, knock something over, because they're not contemplating the dimensionality and movements of everything around them all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas it seems like Bella is paying attention to that, but as if she's not there.
Yeah, she's, like, not all the way in her body.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Absolutely.
Which, like, Stephanie Meyer, when are you going to tell us what Bella's childhood trauma is? Like, what is going on?
Right. Like, based on those remarks we talked about, and the fact that she, like, can't seem to exist in her own physical being, I assume bad things.
Yeah, it's definitely feels like something is being hinted at, but I don't know that the text itself realizes that, like, that's how those traits kind of add up.
it's like descriptive of a personality type or a set of behaviors without necessarily understanding like
how they would
exist.
connect. She was like, yeah, I'm just throwing some tropes at the wall. And it's like, you accidentally built a very interesting monster, but you have no idea.
Yeah. Her fear of blood feels...
Her, like, very, like, over-dramatic. I've never met anyone in my life who is that severely unable to be around blood.
I feel like that, in addition to, like, being a kind of, like, ha ha ha, you're in...
Yes.
So Edward can laugh at you about this, and I will also laugh at you about this.
Little private joke in our vampire novel.
Right.
That you can smell blood.
Right. It feels connected to anxiety about the body, about the permeability of the body, the fragility of the body, the sort of, like, abjectness of, like, thinking about, like, the partial object, right? Like, the blood that leaves the body, and has this kind of tenuous relationship to, like, physical form being, like, both inside and outside the body. And I think that is kind of, like, tied in with why she falls down so much.
Probably. Too focused on smelling blood.
Yeah.
To, like, walk properly.
The text spends so much more time talking about how bad she is at, like, walking and playing volleyball. So much more time talking about how bad she is at those things than it does talking about, like, anything she's good at. Because she's clearly very good at school. She's obviously, like, a really solid academic. I mean, she's got the advantage of having taken some of these classes before, but even if you have written a paper about the Scottish play before, if you need to write another one, it's not going to be, like, a chill thing that you do in, like...
a couple hours.
Yeah, unless you're, like, a really strong academic type.
Yeah. Also, like... private joke from Stephanie to us. Like, what did you write your paper on? Like, whether or not Shakespeare's treatment of the female characters is misogynist.
Oh my
like,
god,
what
so funny.
universe are we even in right now?
Right.
The call is coming from inside the house, girl.
Also, like, how does she deal with reading the out damn spot monologue if she's got such a blood problem?
Yeah. Blood problem.
Yeah, she's got blood problem.
She didn't even know.
Yeah.
It's about to get much worse for her.
Also, the other paper that she talks about writing is about Wuthering Heights, right?
Oh my god, my favorite joke in the world is that Bella Swan has read Wuthering Heights more than once.
She reads it again for fun.
Twilight and Wuthering Heights are the same. It's fine.
Lol.
They are the same text.
What are these other things that I wrote down? In terms of her relationship to her parents, I wanted to just point out the fact that she constantly refers to her dad as Charlie, but that she doesn't do that about her mom.
I know that this is, like, probably unfair, but it, like, always makes me really uncomfortable when, like, a teen or adolescent or even adult refers to their mom as their best friend.
It's weird.
I do feel like it's weird. It's not always, like, bad? I don't know.
Part of it is every time I hear that, I think about Norman Bates.
Sure.
And a boy's best friend is his mother.
Yeah. Goo.
Speaking of, like, weird familial stuff, a thing I was not expecting and was confused about how it was kind of breezed past. So, Edward's siblings
are all dating each other.
Right. So, like, there are 3 of them that are blood related, and then 2 of them that are blood related, and then, like, 2 and 2 of them are dating. Is that what's happening?
Yeah. That's weird.
And Bella is like, whoever's telling the story, Jessica, whoever it is like, so scandalized, like, small town drama.
Yeah, and then she was like, well, I guess actually in Phoenix that would be pretty weird. It's like, yeah, that's weird everywhere.
That is extraordinarily
it's
weird.
really messed up.
Like,
Mormon antics.
I was just astonished by how little attention that was given and how it was just kind of like a throwaway piece of information that did not get much of a reaction.
They're, like, together. It's like, yeah, I would have to spend at least 20 minutes
being like,
parsing that out. Like,
sorry,
run that
okay.
by me one more time.
So, like, which one of them is fucking their stepsister?
So, like, when did this happen? Like, how long have they been dating? How did that play out in the house?
Did their adopted parents know?
Right, and they were like, I guess this is chill, because, like, nah, that's when you call a therapist.
Well, and also, like, how old is anyone?
Right, like, ooh.
Yeah, so there's
like,
just,
yeah,
like,
assuming these are human children, like, I would call the cops.
You know, assuming they're not, it's like, I'm certainly not gonna tell anyone what to do. in that situation.
Right? Like, I guess you're all adults pretending to be in high school.
Right, which is
As
also strange. But I think we should talk about that once it's, like, actually confirmed. Because, like,
sure, yeah.
we're in, like, a place in the book where if I had been living under a rock and had no idea that, like, definitely he's a vampire, this would be the point at which I was certain that that was the case, but it had not been actually confirmed by the text.
But yeah, even in the way that they talk about, like, how different these, like, very beautiful people are, like, it's still in bizarrely wholesome terms. It's not like, oh, like, they're all just, like, fucking each other all the time. They're, like, this weird orgy of foster teens looking pretty and wearing their eye makeups. Like, no, it's like, no, they're in very committed monogamous relationships with their foster siblings.
Yeah.
Probably they have promise rings. They all go camping together.
Which I assume means they fuck in the woods and then drink the blood of bears.
But yeah, just, like, this very intense focus, like, throughout in all of these different directions on, like, physical health and, like, expressing that through, like, the outdoors and sports and, like, Charlie's always fishing and, like, they are all backpacking and, like, going on these trips. We're all gonna, like, go hiking at the beach.
Yeah.
All of which is very Mormon.
Remembering all of the beach bonfires of my own high school experience, which admittedly I'm from Long Island, so it's a different vibe.
Different thing.
Those were mostly about drinking 40s and, like, skinny dipping and, like, throwing lighters into the fire to see if when they would explode and, like, making out with people on boulders.
No one, I think, has even mentioned, like, beer. Just, like, the concerns of these teens are still, like, within the bounds of, like, what would be totally appropriate behavior. Like, no one's parents would get mad at them for anything that anyone's done so far.
Which is so
weird
bizarre.
For a book about teens.
Yeah.
Normally there's, like, some disconnect. Like, Bella's not super open with Charlie about what she's doing, but she's not, like, doing anything bad.
Right.
She's like, I want to go to a bookstore.
Yeah.
Which is, like, that's actually very strange for the genre, I think.
Yeah, because generally it's, like, teens sneaking around doing bad stuff, and then
these teens
something
are
supernatural, like, it becomes involved.
Asserting their independence by, like, being really responsible. I'm going to assert my burgeoning adulthood by, like, not letting you cook anymore because you're bad at it. Yeah. I'm going to make you try an enchilada.
Man.
Right? Like,
the whitest scene ever written.
Bounds of possibility are both, like, really weird and strange because there's a supernatural element, but, like, otherwise so tightly confined to this, like, very specific, very, for the most part, white and, like, very suburban almost. I know it's a small town, but, like,
it's got a suburban vibe, though.
Of just, like, everyone knows everyone else, and we're all in, like, our nuclear families, and, like, are roughly middle class, and are going to our high school, and, like, no one's getting fucked up in the woods.
Yeah, which is counter to any experience of the woods that I have ever had.
I mean, it's, like, not that different from, like, my actual high school experience, but I was, like, sort of aware at the time that it was maybe not representative. I was about as high-strung then as I am now, and I dealt with that by just not doing anything wrong.
Oof. It is interesting, too, that in terms of the class thing, that the Cullen family is also flagged as being slightly higher class than everybody else, right? And then in this last chapter we read, it really being emphasized. Oh yeah, they have money on a level that nobody else in this town has. It's interesting because being a vampire is often, like, a metaphor for class, but it's like, oh, they're actually also rich.
Yeah, but not, like, interesting rich. Like, they're not doing weird stuff with their money or, like, Howard Hughesing. They're just like, oh, no, we're just, like, kind of well-to-do. Like, this doctor and his family.
Right.
They have, like, a nice new car, but, like, not a flashy car.
Right, it's a Volvo.
Right? Like, they're just, everyone's wearing... Oh my god, what is she described as wearing? Like a beige
leather
leather jacket and an off-white turtleneck.
Only a Mormon would imagine that a vampire would wear a fucking ivory-colored turtleneck.
I think that might have been where I wrote Mormon and all caps.
Yeah,
It fit him snugly, emphasizing how muscular his chest was.
Which, like, that's on brand for vampires.
Right, like, that seems alright.
It's the beige jacket with the ivory turtleneck sweater.
Like no human.
Yeah, that's like a
certainly
Ken
no
doll.
pale human. Like,
yeah,
play up your coloring to the extent that you have any.
Oof, that's a poor choice.
You just look like a human condom.
Ooh.
It's bad.
I understand maybe if you're, like, in your foster sibling woods orgies, you guys are all, like, biting each other's necks and stuff, and you need to wear a turtleneck. And I know it's, like, chilly there, but also...
But that's just, like, not the implication.
Yeah.
It's like Bella
also,
thinks
like,
that he's really stylish.
Right. But it sounds like Bella's fashion sense is also pretty awful.
She mentions a blouse at one point, which, like,
what teen uses
no one
the
in
word
high
blouse?
school wears a blouse, or certainly calls it that.
Right. It's like, oh, a shirt.
My going out top.
Oh, can we talk a little bit about the landscape and, like, the geographic location?
Yeah.
So there are all of these descriptors of Forks and the surrounding area as being, like, too green and this sort of, like, obscene lushness of, like, there are plants everywhere, and there are even plants inside the school office, and there's just green everywhere, and the light is green, and everything is, like...
It's kind of sexual. Whether that's intentional or not. Like, it's definitely very, like, lush in, like, a couple different senses of the word.
Yeah, that it's, like, nature is just, like, propagating itself overly intensely in this location, and that is dominating the landscape, and dominating a lot of, like, Bella's thinking of where she is.
Yeah, because she doesn't seem to, like, she's not thinking about it in those terms at all, which is also what's really interesting to me. Like, she's gone to this really, like, lushly green plant vegetative place and just, well, because she is, like, so homesick for, like, a desert, which is, like, sort of strange. Like, what you're describing seems really beautiful and, like, a really alive place to be, but you are thinking of it as, like, really dead and sunless and, like, cold.
It's interesting that she kind of equates sunlight with life and sort of, like, success in nature, but Phoenix specifically is a location I've spent a decent amount of time in. It's basically just desert and occasionally cacti, but, like, it's a lot of concrete and sand.
Yeah.
And it's this sort of sprawling, you have to drive everywhere on highways, and it's too sunny to be alive sometimes. Like, it is actually extraordinarily, like, devastatingly hot there.
Yeah.
It'll be, like, 95 degrees in the middle of the night.
The Pacific Northwest is, like, pretty moderate. It's not like she moved to a place that was, like, really notably cold.
Right. Like, it's not like she moved to Alaska, which is...
Yeah,
they say at
where
one
they
point,
allegedly have moved from.
That felt like it was significant that they had moved there from a place that is the opposite of Arizona, but I wasn't sure exactly
and
what
is very
that was.
cold.
Right.
The cold ones. Cracking open a boy with the cold ones.
Yep, that's all I could think. That whole scene with Bella talking to Jacob was very weird to me.
Yeah.
Because I partially couldn't get past feeling very aware that this 17-year-old is trying really hard to hit on this, like, barely 15-year-old to get a piece of information out of him.
It's just, like, so unnecessary. Like, this is your childhood friend. You could just, like, talk to him like a person. But for whatever reason, like, her whole worldview is, like, so compulsive, heteronormatively skewed that, like, the idea that she would just, like, oh, like, let's catch up. We're friends. Can I ask you this thing that's, like, kind of weird? Is just, like, not an option.
They didn't really know each other because he was really young when she was last there.
Right.
But still, like, she could easily...
catch up as, like, a family friend.
The, like, weird, heavy-handed, attempting to be sexy stuff.
Yeah, it felt
weird.
really misplaced and uncomfortable.
And then, of course, Mike has another, like, shitty
weird
Mike.
episode. And you're like, you gotta chill, man.
Yeah. Fuck Mike.
Truly.
I don't like him.
No.
None of the human men under the age of 40 seem
doing a good
acceptable.
thing. Yeah, Charlie has his moments at least.
Charlie seems fine. I mean, he's a cop.
For a cop.
Although, at one point it is implied that Bella gets her clumsiness from her dad. Who gave this man a gun?
Or the other thing that was, like, really bizarre is she mentions him coming home and, like, putting his gun belt just, like, on a hook. And she's like, yeah, you know, when I was younger, he used to lock it up. But I guess now he trusts me to, like, not be so clumsy that I shoot myself by accident or so depressed that I shoot myself on purpose.
Yeah, that was a very loaded statement.
Like, that's super dark. And, like, not so dark that it's, like, weird or shocking that a teen would say it or think it, but, like, not really in keeping with, like, her general vibe. Like, it's not like Bella has a notably dark sense of humor.
Right, she's generally, like, just kind of sarcastic. And not even that often.
Yeah, she just, like, has pegged everyone in this town as, like, a yokel who can't understand the intonation.
I think she is described as laughing humorlessly more times than she is described as laughing.
Yeah, she's very bored by everything these people have to say.
Yeah.
Which is, like, not relatable. She likes Angela because Angela's quiet.
Do we think Angela's queer? I hope Angela's queer.
I mean, I hope that too. I don't think the book has that on its radar.
Just because there was a moment where, like, one of the other girls was grilling Angela about, like, what her type was.
Oh, yeah, and she's just like, I hate this.
And she's just, like, visibly uncomfortable.
And Bella saves her.
Yeah. A certain kind of social finesse.
Yes.
Where she's actually paying attention to what's going on with other people emotionally in a way that high schoolers often can't do.
Yeah, she's, like, very diplomatic with all of these boys who are, like,
annoying.
who are, like, yeah, being really annoying that she's not interested in, that are being very persistent. And she's like, I am recognizing, one, that I'm not interested in these boys. Two, that this is making me a pariah among all of these girls, because these girls, like, know these boys and have crushes on them or whatever.
Right.
So, like, this is bad for me in a couple different directions. How do I fix both these problems?
And I think, like, generally manages to do some kind of complicated social maneuvering without being overly manipulative or, like, harmful to anyone.
Yeah, she's just, like, pointing out to these, like, dumb boys who, like, oh, like, I have fake excuse, but, like, why don't you ask our other mutual friend?
Who obviously has, like, a crush on you,
very
you
obvious,
idiot.
like, you dum-dum. Something people complain about with Bella's character is that she's just, like, so isolated from her peers and, like, is a bad friend or whatever. But, like, she's kind of navigating these weird situations pretty diplomatically.
Yeah.
And without drawing attention to the fact that she's doing it. Like, if she wants to kind of hang out on her quilt reading Jane Austen, whomst could blame her? Like,
right.
That's a perfectly normal thing to want to do.
And especially in the context of being someone who has just moved to a small town where everyone knows each other, knowing that you're not going to be there very long. I think not being very invested in having a social life there would be completely normal and reasonable.
Especially if she wasn't, like, a super social person in Phoenix either.
Right, which
it's, like, troubling.
I mean, because that seems a little like it was an extreme situation. Like, it seems like she didn't have any friends.
Right? It's like, what's going on with you, Bella? We're not gonna find out, are we? We're just gonna pretend like all of this is just a normal personality strain.
Or I wonder if it's like, oh, you were too busy being friends with your mom.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the only conclusion we can draw based on the information that we have, which is a bummer. I also, like, she calls out Phil as, like, being too young for her mom. Like, that bummed me out.
Well, I was trying to figure out how old Phil is based on both that remark and the fact that he gave Bella for Christmas, like, some new metal or something.
I'm sure it's Muse.
That was the point where I was like, how old is Phil?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because he's playing minor league ball, which is not, like, a...
long-term...
That's not something you really do into your 30s.
Yeah.
There's a real...
You either go to the majors or you get done.
You find a different thing. You find a used car dealership, and then you do that.
In our discussion of the importance of sports in this book...
Yeah.
Didn't even talk about the fact that the reason she's in Forks at all is because her mother is with an athlete.
And I think that we're supposed to interpret athlete as like, oh, he's a good guy, though. Like, that seems like it's intended as a marker of, again, like, wholesomeness.
Whereas, like, I got the impression that Phil sucks.
Which is, like, not unreasonable, again, like, given the information that we have.
Right. Well, because she does say that she doesn't think he's very good at baseball.
Well, yeah, because he's in the minors.
Right. Oh, there was a very specific moment that made me wonder what year this was taking place. It was something I didn't think about at all until they were doing the blood typing in class. For some reason, that moment where this, like, were they juniors?
Yeah.
In high school, suddenly is all getting handed lancets and, like, spurting their blood out into things.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, clearly this is not taking place in 2017. Like, this I know. But I was like, oh, but in what year is this actually happening? And I realized I didn't know. It seems kind of purposefully devoid of, like, specific reference points. and it's doing this kind of like semi-rural Americana thing where most people's cars are kind of old and like the buildings are all kind of old, and so there's not like a ton of specificity about time.
No one has phones so far, like cell phones.
Yeah.
That I have noticed, which I think the book was originally published in 2005. So it's not that strange that the high school students wouldn't have phones, although it's like sort of weird to think about now.
Right. Like as a high school senior in 2005, I had a cell phone, but not everyone I knew did.
Yeah, like I think that was around the time when like I got a phone for the first time, and it was like only for emergencies. But yeah, so that I think like scans, but also is like a microgenerational thing, and also the way her internet situation is set up. She's on like some ancient dial-up modem where she has like time to go like make a meal and eat it while the page is loading.
Yeah, when she not Googles, but like when she just...
My favorite search engine.
Yep.
Is you, Stephanie? Was it Bing?
Hilarious.
I binged vampires.
When she asks Jeeves what a vampire is, that scene, I was just cackling.
Alta Vista.
I was like, whose GeoCities site did you find?
It looked academic, did it? Go to Wikipedia, like an adult.
Lol. I did feel a little bit of like pride of my people when it's like, oh, but then the one entry about the Italian vampires, they're the good ones. And I was like, yeah!
We did it! The thing that I like about that scene is like, oh, like, why would you have to Google vampire? And it's like, well, if you're trying to distinguish something that is happening in your actual life from like a very long history of pop culture, that would actually be kind of hard to research. Like the idea that you're like, okay, well, like clearly it's not this goofy Dracula situation,
right?
But like something weird is going on, and I don't have the language except for this goofy thing. Like, how do I get to anything that's like maybe based in reality?
That scene was hilarious to me, but
as a noted goth,
right? Because like I can't remember a time in my life when I didn't know what a vampire was. Not that she doesn't know what the word means, but that she is like grasping at like resources to know what the thing really is.
Just like the breadth of folklore.
Yeah.
And like across all of these different cultures, and like trying to piece together something that like maybe fits with reality. Which again, like I don't think there's any way to make that scene not seem goofy, but I sort of read it as an attempt to like draw attention to the fact that like vampire pop culture and mythology like exists in this universe. Like we're not being introduced for the first time to the idea of like a creature that drinks blood.
That aside from the fact that these things are existing, this story is very much set in reality.
Yeah. Which I think is like a good choice to make as like framing the story of like the writer Stephanie Meyer, am aware that there is a very long and broad canon of vampire stories. I am acknowledging that those exist while like differentiating without having to like suspend your disbelief.
I think it's generally preferable when a text acknowledges its placement.
Yeah, just like to make a nod. Like, yes, like I feel like this comes up a lot in zombie media. Of like, does the concept of a zombie exist in this world, or are we pretending this is like a totally unforeseen and unfamiliar event?
It's like, well, a huge amount of our cultural output is preoccupied with this concept, so does that exist in this world or no?
Yeah, and like, we're never going to get to the actual root of the zombie myth in any zombie movie, because it's like too much of a bummer, and would require not having white leads, but oops, it's about slavery.
True.
Zoinks. To shift slightly, what do you think about Bella's dreams as they have come up so far?
They feel a little on the nose.
Yes.
But what I was unsure about was whether or not they were supposed to be kind of prophetic, or if they were supposed to be indicating some kind of like psychic sensitivity on her part, or if it was just like, you are noticing more than you perhaps think you are, and are just like pretty directly processing the information that has come to you.
I think that's like a pretty fair read on like the content of her dreams.
Yeah.
The thing that always, and this like it'll become clear like why this sticks out to me now on a reread, like, and that was the first night that I dreamed of Edward Cullen.
Right.
It's like such a weird, kind of creepy line.
Yeah. The only people that I regularly dream about are people that I've had creepy obsessive crushes on.
Yeah, so. Or just like had like some very intense and like emotionally fraught relationship with.
Yeah.
But yeah, speaking of like emotionally fraught weird relationships, their dynamic of his like constantly like, no, like you shouldn't be friends with me, like I can't stop myself, like if you know what's good for you, you like won't be around me, is so viscerally familiar, but also just like really weird.
Because I feel like that's the kind of shit that dudes don't usually start pulling until their 20s.
Yeah, I don't know. It was just like, it was like too real for me. I was like, oh, this is why I was so messed up about this book. Of just like, I'm rejecting you, but like telling you also that I don't want to, which is like a really weird thing to do to someone. I'm like passive aggressively leading you on in this like sort of complicated way.
Yeah, there's a lot of like twists and turns to that, and I think it's understandable that the reaction is then this like deeply intense attachment.
Yeah, like her reaction to it makes perfect sense to me. It's like, yeah that's like some weird head games to do to someone that like doesn't know you.
That is some like Dyer the Seducer type stuff, which if you haven't read, you would
is that, like,
set it on fire.
Pickup artist nonsense?
No, it's a novella by Soren Kierkegaard.
Ugh.
Which someone that I was briefly involved with had me read because it reminded him of my relationship with someone else. But it's about someone who gets this younger woman to fall in love with him so that he can reject her, because that is the way that he could possess her most greatly. He is framed as being a really bad dude.
I'm so weary.
Yeah.
It's my only. It's like, oh, I'm exhausted. But yeah, just like that dynamic is as like weird and familiar to me now as it was like when I read it the first time. Just like, I don't know. I just like really lays the groundwork for like a not normal relationship, even more so than like the supernatural aspects of like, you're starting on this.
Right, well, he, like, kind of starts gaslighting her so early on.
Oh, immediately! That was most of my underlining, is every time he just tells her something she remembers is wrong.
Right. It's like, no, my eyes have always been this color. Like, what are you talking about?
I was standing right next to you.
I was right
no one will
there.
believe you.
Yeah.
Is, like, an immediate pivot and, like, upsetting.
And on a certain level, like, you don't live very long as a vampire if you're not deceptive about it.
Yes.
Like, I get that.
Like, there's in-plot justifications for it, but, like, on the level
But it's also, like, textbook abusive gaslighting behavior.
Yeah. Like, just, like, out the gate.
Right.
It's like, this person seemed to hate me really intensely, and, like, one, I'm assuming it's my fault. Clearly something is wrong with me to, like, make someone react to me that way.
Right.
And then also exacerbating that with, like, I'm not saying that I don't want to be around you, I'm just telling you that you shouldn't be. I am assuming what is best for you.
Right, because I know and you don't.
Yes. I'm, like, doing this for your benefit. And then later being like, actually, I give up. I'm just going to do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Which is to be around you, which is what you want. But, like, with weird tensions and, like, folding back in on itself. And then also, I'm going to tell you what you do and don't remember. And run really hot and cold on you.
Yeah.
It's not great. It's very relatable.
Absolutely.
But it's not great.
Absolutely. And, like, some of that behavior would feel realistic even just, like, about teens, right?
Yeah,
about, like,
because it could
teens.
just be, like, oh, like, the kind of bad hot dude is... What is unnerving about him has nothing to do so far with his, like, supernatural abilities.
Yeah, what's unsettling about his behavior is what he says after he does something with his supernatural abilities.
Like, he could just kind of, like, stop the car. Like, he can move fast enough. He could have just, like, left the scene. Like, he's drawing attention to his, like, supernatural stuff in, like, this weird gaslighty way. You don't need to. Like, you just save her life and then, like, make it look like you didn't. Like, you move, apparently, like, way faster than anyone can see. Like, you can just do that. And she'll, like, feel kind of confused about it. But, like, clearly everyone here's super Christian. They're like, oh, you're guardian angel.
I keep forgetting that. That, like, I should be assuming that every character that isn't not a human.
Right. Well, probably even them too. Because it's never, like, anyone's going to church or, like, talking about it. It's just, like, an overarching, like, vibe and set of norms.
Right. Like, presumably an entire high school full of teens who don't drink has to be super religious, right?
Yeah, but it's almost like she, in writing it, didn't want to, like, make it a Christian book in that way. Like, she's not doing it, like,
aside from the fact that she quotes Genesis on the as the epigraph.
Well, like, Old Testament's kind of fair game.
Yeah, fair enough.
I feel like you're allowed to quote the Old Testament without it being, like, a thing. Once we get into the New Testament, then it's a little iffy. Like, then you're doing something. But yeah, like, it's not explicit in the world of Forks that we are existing in, but is, like, very pervasive in terms of, like, the reality that is feasible for any of these characters.
I think that makes total sense.
And I feel like the thing with, like, yeah, those foster kids are dating is, like, maybe Stephanie trying to overcorrect.
Yeah.
I feel like, what would a secular person think was weird? Right? Like, what's a thing that's, like, super unthinkable to me, but, like, maybe if I'm assuming I don't have my worldview, would be, like, kind of normal.
I mean, I guess it's because they all have this, like, otherworldly charisma, are really good looking, and have a lot of money, that they haven't actually been, like, run out of town for having, like, incest teens.
That's weird. Cause for genuine concern.
And, like, would make you, like, a social pariah.
Yeah. But yeah, and, like, the only people who do seem to, like, have a real genuine problem with this family are the Quileutes. And like, that gets framed in, like, a really messed up racist way.
Yeah, I've kind of held off from commenting on that aspect because I want to see what else happens with those characters.
That's fair.
Because right now the text is very guilty of, like, the, like, only non-white indigenous characters are defined only by their status as those things.
Right.
But also we haven't really spent much time with them yet, so I'm, like, hoping that is not so dire going forward.
Yeah, but even, like, when Jacob is telling her the backstory, like, it's so specific in a way that doesn't seem like anything anyone would really accept. Like, no, it's the same Carlisle. Like, the same Carlisle is this very ancient vampire. Right. Who is a surgeon in the town, and we all just think that this is the case and are, like, behaving relatively normally about it. And I'm just telling you.
Sure.
Sounds bananas in a way that feels really bizarre.
Even if it was just like, yes, these are the descendants of...
Right. Like, we think that they are supernatural in this way.
Yeah. Like, that would make more sense.
You would call them werewolves. Like, what? Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that was a weird move, too. It's like, you guys are having a conversation in English. Come on. Something
that the movie does a really good job of is, like, making this town actually pretty diverse.
Oh, that's refreshing.
Yeah, like, it's not, they don't do, like, the best job in the world of it, but, like, all of the high school characters are, like, a pretty broad mix of people.
The town generally reads pretty white.
Yes.
So, like, I have perhaps been making some, like, inaccurate assumptions about specific characters.
Sure, I mean, well, the one girl's described as having corn silk hair.
Yeah.
Like, they're not...
That's a real white girl right there.
Indeed.
But I guess it might not be...
She's not doing anything to dissuade you from that, though. Like, the only people who are, like, intentionally racialized are the people on the reservation with, like, their copper skin or whatever. And, like,
yeah, it's like...
Calm down.
Bella self-describes as ivory-skinned at one point.
Which is meant to be, like, a weird thing about her. Like, no, I'm just, like, from this really hot, sunny place, but I'm just so pale.
It's like, yeah, there aren't white people in Arizona?
Right? Like...
Girl, what are you talking about?
Like, calm down.
The fact that she has anxiety about standing out for how white she is.
It rings very strange.
Do we think Stephanie has ever been to Phoenix?
I don't know. She might be from there.
Okay.
I feel like that...
Oh, maybe that explains. Because I was like, I don't understand why Bella likes Phoenix.
She lives in Arizona with her husband and 3 sons.
Phoenix sucks.
It does suck. It's bad.
Sorry, listeners from Phoenix.
Like,
if we ever have
it's
any
not
eventually.
Good.
Like, there are people I like who live there.
Yeah, like, the desert's cool.
Yeah.
But the city
itself is just, like...
one suburb of itself forever.
Do we have any, like, things that we haven't talked about yet that we wanted to...
The thing that, like, really bummed me out the first time and this time, just, like, Bella being like, yeah, it's really clear that he never got over my mom and it makes me uncomfortable, is, like, too real an observation.
Yeah.
Because, like, he seems like he's doing fine. Like, he seems like a pretty stable, solitary dude who, like, wants to spend time with his daughter who hates the town he lives in and who clearly wanted to live with her mom.
It seems like Charlie is not an especially paternal person, but also it doesn't seem like Bella has really tried to have much of a relationship with him in recent years.
In ways that don't seem like it's because of anything he did.
Yeah,
it's not like, oh, I don't want
like,
to talk to my shitty dad, which, like, by all means. Just like,
it sort of seems like neither of them put a lot of effort into, like, having kind of, like...
a normal, like, day-to-day relationship. It's like, oh, it's my dad that I see, like, a couple weeks a year.
Yeah. That dynamic all kind of made sense to me.
Yeah, no, it rings very true. Just, like, that note of, like, he has never gotten past this, like, young, ill-fated marriage.
He hasn't remarried. And, like...
Clearly, who the fuck knows what Renee is doing. Losing phones and blouses and running around with a minor league baseball player.
There's not even an implication that Charlie is, like, dating. And in a town
or, like,
that small...
ever has.
Yeah, and in a town that small...
That's
that
weird.
Would be
like,
information
he's, like,
that
a
he
pretty
would know immediately.
successful, eligible dude. Like, he has some power. Not that, like, anyone should date cops, but... In the pantheon of, like, this small town social setup that we have, like, he seems like a perfectly fine dude who's, like, not... There's no reason that he wouldn't have, like, found someone to marry if he wanted to. He just, like, doesn't want to.
Right.
He has just, like, a very understated Miss Havisham situation going.
And that he's been in this kind of, like, bachelor-y mode since then.
It was also just like, what happened in this marriage? And it's like, Renee is flighty and hates forks. And it's like, well, you could have both moved. Like, unless it is a Twin Peaks situation and he can never leave. He is married to the ground. He cannot leave.
Married to the woods.
This sphere of the earth. Mm-hmm. He is trapped here forevermore.
One other Twin Peaks related thought that I was having. There were a couple of moments, specifically when Bella is thinking about the human teen boys, that did feel a little like Laura Palmer-esque to me. There's some stuff in Twin Peaks and in The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer where she's talking about, in this sort of saddened and frustrated way, about how it's easy to get boys to like her, but in a way where she feels like they don't really know her at all. Like, maybe they think they do.
Well, yeah, because Bella is very aware of herself as a novelty, which is, like, true. She just moved here, but just, like, completely, like, yeah, like, I already know that they don't care about, like, me as a person or my interests. Like, I'm just, like, a new thing that has happened in this town where nothing happens.
And also that, like, whatever the surface level interaction is what they're interfacing with.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, how some of her attraction to Edward is the fact that he is totally uninterested in that kind of surface level interaction. Everything is super high stakes and intense, and in their first conversation he asks these really probing questions about her family life.
Yeah, and seems like really interested in them.
Yeah, like actually listens to her talk about herself in a way that is meaningful, which hasn't really happened.
And is tremendously attractive.
Yeah.
As, like, a trait in another person, genuinely being interested. The plot reason for why that's happening is, like, kind of funny. Like, I can read everyone's mind except for yours. So, like, anything she thinks is fascinating to him because it's a secret.
One thing in terms of vampire lore, in terms of that he can read everyone's mind except hers. In some other vampire books, vampires can read the minds of other people and other vampires except for the vampire that made them.
Huh. That is interesting.
Like, I think that's the case in the Anne Rice books.
Okay.
And it's the source of some, like, weird interpersonal shit. And in terms of, like, who finds other people mysterious or how they can connect on what levels or who feels invaded by other people. And so I'm curious, like, that feels like it must be a meaningful piece of information, But I don't know. Again, it's similar to the dreams. It's like, I don't know if this is just like...
exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Or if it's like doing something deeper.
If this were a different text, I would maybe be like, this must mean that secretly Bella was adopted and her parents are vampires. Or something.
She's reincarnated.
Right, like that there's some kind of secret to be unveiled that is the cause of that.
But yeah,
but it might just be the thing at face value.
Yeah, it's a very... oh my god, the introduction to the 10th edition. I'm gonna read this part of it because I laughed really hard. ... I am a very prosaic kind of person. Self-described. You're like, we know.
That's fine.
But yeah, because it is a very, like, unmagical feeling world, for the most part.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of, like, mysterious layers going on. Just kind of, like, the one mystery. Which is, like, seems like it's going to get solved pretty quickly.
Although I guess the one thing so far that does feel counter to that is what we haven't talked about at all, which is the, like, 2-paragraph prelude thing, which felt, like, overly cinematic to me. Too much like, oh, this is the establishing shot in the movie, and then we cut to flashback and everything leads us back to this moment. So that, like, rang a little false to me because of that.
It's a really weird note to start on. Because, like, the first thing we know about Bella is she is ready to die.
And then she proceeds to maintain that personality throughout.
Yeah, no, she's just, like that all the time.
Right.
Which I, like, she's honestly find kind of relatable.
Maybe she's now finally found some focus for that trait about herself.
Right. Again, like, if her experience of the world is that she's, like, so physically inept and, like, small. Yeah, like, everything is dangerous and bad. Now that I'm, like, being literally threatened, it feels at least like that makes sense. Right? Like, it seems like my whole life has been hinting at this.
Yeah, we haven't actually talked about the Genesis quote that's the epigraph, because it just sort of feels a little on the nose.
Yeah.
Same with the cover art, that it's doing like a Garden of Eden, Eve and the Apple thing, in addition to like a Snow White thing, which there are some fun readings of Snow White as being like a sublimation of necrophilia.
Sure.
Because she keeps essentially dying, right? Like,
yeah. But yeah, something I think that we will talk about more as this book progresses is like what it means in this universe to become a vampire.
It seems like the rules of engagement for vampirism in this book are fairly different from most contemporary pop representations of vampires, just because it seems like some of the basic stuff does not apply.
Yeah.
With that, I'm just kind of like waiting to be told more.
Yeah, just like the literal physical reality of it, and then also like the ethical framework that these vampires are existing in, having like self-identified as like, no, we're the good ones, compared to what?
Yeah, and also the sort of mechanics of how to live life as a vampire while trying to actively not hurt people, right? Like, is there any ethical behavior under vampirism?
And also as like, again, like these characters who are existing in like a pretty pervasively Christian and not even Catholic. I feel like Catholics are like ready to grapple with vampirism.
Oh, totally.
Like part and parcel of how spooky the whole thing is you're like, this is a pretty direct just reversal of what I was already signed up for. It's more clear what the stakes are in that sense, but like when the version of Christianity that you're dealing with is a little bit further removed from like the literalness of blood, how do you then deal with the idea of vampirism? Like, how does your occultism fit into that? How does like your understanding of death and the afterlife fit into that?
And like, do these vampires believe in God? And what does that mean?
Yeah, that's gonna come up.
I look forward to it.
Yeah.
One other thought, just to circle back slightly, is whether or not vampires can survive off of blood that is not human blood is a thing that fluctuates in various texts on vampires. And so those mechanics I'm interested in.
Is there anything you're looking forward to in this like next chunk?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to whatever hilarious dialogue is going to happen whenever he actually admits that he's a vampire.
Oh boy, get pumped.
And I don't think I'm going to get this for a while, but I'm looking forward to the actual, like, description of some blood sucking happening. But I suspect I will have to wait a good long time. One of the things I'm looking forward to is just, like, knowing more about both the physical and metaphysical mechanics of how vampires work in these books.
Yeah.
And werewolves.
Yeah, because they just kind of, like, that's a throwaway. It's like,
oh, werewolves,
but
yes.
yeah, we turn into wolves. And you're like, Stephanie...
Yeah, really just putting that out there.
All right. Let's put that in my pocket for later. We're going to have to talk about this. But yeah, so we're going to read the next 8 chapters and see where that puts us. I think this is the relationship is going to escalate pretty rapidly. Cool. Great.
All right.
Yeah, good talk, fam.
Woo!
American Vampire. Back next week.